I still remember the smell of hospital disinfectant mixing with the sweet scent of the flowers Mark had brought. Our baby boy James was just 6 hours old, sleeping peacefully in my arms. The door swung open and my mother-in-law Cynthia stepped in, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes locked onto James, narrowing slightly as she studied his face. The room went quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. "He doesn't look like Mark at all," she said, her voice cold as ice. "Those eyes, that chin, they're nothing like our family." My heart stopped. I looked up at Mark, expecting him to defend us, but his face had changed. Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt. He stared at James like he was seeing him for the first time. "Mom, don't start this," he said weakly, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. Cynthia just smiled, a thin, satisfied smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm just saying what everyone will be thinking, dear." She touched Mark's arm. "Blood doesn't lie." I clutched James tighter as the happiest day of my life shattered around me. For 3 days, Mark tried to act normal. He held James, changed diapers, took photos. But I caught him studying our baby's face when he thought I wasn't looking. The dimple in James's chin, his light hazel eyes that matched neither my brown nor Mark's blue. Finally, sitting on the edge of our bed, his voice cracking, Mark said the words that broke my heart. "Alina, I need to ask you something." His hands were shaking. "James, he doesn't look like me or my family. I need to know the truth." "The truth?" My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. "You think I cheated? After 7 years together?" "I don't want to think that," he whispered, "but my mom showed me baby pictures of me, and I need to be sure." Hot tears spilled down my cheeks. "You want a paternity test?" It wasn't a question. The distance between us on that bed felt like miles. "Just to put this behind us," he said, "to shut my mom up." But we both knew it was more. The seed of doubt had taken root, and nothing would be the same until it was resolved. Mark moved out 3 days later. "Just to clear my head," he claimed, throwing clothes into a duffel bag, "until the test results come back." He went to his mother's house, of course. Cynthia had won round 1. The apartment felt massive without him. At night, I'd feed James in the rocking chair Mark had assembled, watching the empty side of our bed. My phone stayed quiet except for his formal texts asking about the baby. His friends stopped calling. My messages to our mutual friends went unanswered. Somehow, word had spread that Alina, the always working nurse, had gotten pregnant from an affair. When my sister came over, she hugged me tight. "This isn't right, Alina. Mark's being a coward." I just nodded, bouncing James gently as he fussed. I don't understand how he could doubt me. How could he think I'd lie about something so important? The most painful part wasn't the loneliness or the gossip. It was watching Mark become someone I didn't recognize, a man who could abandon his wife and newborn over his mother's whispers. But then, I remembered something that didn't add up. Something Cynthia had said months ago. It was during my baby shower. I'd stepped into the hallway for air when I overheard Cynthia on the phone behind the half-closed guest room door. "No one can ever find out," she'd whispered urgently. "It dies with us, understand? No one ever needs to know." At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Rich people always had secrets. But now, that conversation played in my mind on repeat. After 2 sleepless nights, I called Nora Jensen, a private investigator a colleague had once used for a custody battle. She arrived at my apartment wearing jeans and a blazer, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "So," she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, "your mother-in-law suddenly claims your baby isn't her son's, and your husband believes her." I nodded, bouncing James on my knee. Nora's eyes softened when they landed on the baby. Men can be idiots about genetics. Half the time, newborns don't look like either parent. "There's more." I told her about the phone call, watching her expression change. "Rich woman with secrets," Nora mused, typing notes on her tablet. "Let's find out what she's hiding." While Nora dug into Cynthia's past, my mother-in-law was busy destroying my reputation. Through the grapevine, I heard the whispers. Alina was working those night shifts with Dr. Harrison. My friend Sarah reported grimly. Cynthia's telling everyone they were suspiciously close. I nearly dropped the phone. Dr. Harrison was 62 with grandchildren my age. Later that day, Mark texted, "People are saying things. I don't know what to believe anymore." I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath and replied, "You could try believing your wife." He didn't answer. That night, I tried recalling every detail about Cynthia from our 7 years together. She'd always been controlling, always kept Mark close. She rarely spoke about his childhood and changed the subject whenever Mark's birth came up. The next morning, Nora called. I found something interesting. Cynthia's medical records are locked tight, but I discovered she was admitted to Mercy Ridge Hospital in 1995, the year Mark was born. For giving birth? I asked. That's just it, Nora said. The record says stillbirth, but then there's Mark. Something doesn't add up. My hands trembled as I hung up. What exactly was Cynthia hiding? While James napped, I dug through our storage closet, finding the photo albums Cynthia had given us when we got married. I'd never looked closely at Mark's baby pictures before. Now I studied them intently, comparing them to James sleeping in his bassinet. Mark at 2 months old had darker skin than James. No dimpled chin. His eyes were already turning from newborn blue to the deep blue they'd stay. James's lighter hazel eyes and dimpled chin looked nothing like baby Mark. But they didn't look like me either. A chill ran down my spine. If James didn't resemble either of us, what did that mean? My phone pinged with a text from the lab. The paternity test results were ready, available online with our password. With shaking fingers, I logged in. I needed to know before Mark did. Needed to prepare myself. The screen loaded. Match probability, 99.9%. Mark was James's father. I sank back against the couch, relief washing over me. But then confusion followed. If Mark was definitely James's father, why did they look so different? And why was Cynthia so convinced otherwise? I didn't share the results. Not yet. Something bigger was happening, and I needed to understand what. Nora called at 7 a.m. I found something critical, she said, her voice tight with excitement. After calling in some favors, I accessed sealed records from Mercy Ridge Hospital. I paced the living room as she explained. Cynthia was admitted on March 15, 1995, for a stillbirth, a baby boy. But here's where it gets strange. There's no death certificate, no funeral records. Instead, there's a birth certificate for Mark, dated the same day. My mind raced. What are you saying? I'm not sure yet, Nora admitted, but something happened at that hospital. There was another woman who gave birth that day, a young mother named Heather Collins. Her records indicate her baby died shortly after birth. I sat down hard on the couch. 2 babies, 2 mothers, on the same day. And one woman left with a living child when she should have had none. Nora finished. I'm tracking down hospital staff from that period. This could be coincidence, but... We both knew it wasn't. The question was, how far would Cynthia go to hide the truth? I looked at James, sleeping peacefully. Find Heather Collins, I said, and find out what happened to her baby. The following day, an envelope arrived containing the official paternity test results. I already knew what they said, but I called Mark anyway. The results came, I said when he answered. His breathing changed. And? Would you like to come over and open them together? After a long pause, he agreed. An hour later, he stood awkwardly in our living room, looking at James's bassinet but not approaching it. I handed him the envelope. You do it. His hands shook as he tore it open, eyes scanning the document. The color drained from his face. 99.9% match, he whispered. I am his father. Did you really have doubts? I asked quietly. He couldn't meet my eyes. My mom showed me pictures, made comparisons. I'm sorry, Alina. I should have trusted you. But it wasn't that simple anymore. The way he'd abandoned us so easily, moved back with his mother without a fight, something had broken between us. This doesn't fix everything, I said. And I'm not sure your mother will accept these results anyway. Mark looked confused. Why wouldn't she? I chose my words carefully. I think she has reasons for wanting to believe James isn't yours. Reasons that have nothing to do with me. Cynthia requested a proper family dinner to make amends. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I had questions only she could answer. She opened the door to her mansion wearing pearls and a practiced smile. Alina, darling, and little James, come in, come in. Mark hovered nervously as his mother took the baby, studying him with narrowed eyes. During dinner, I deliberately steered the conversation toward childhood. It's interesting how genetics work, I said casually. Mark must have gotten his blue eyes from his father. Cynthia's fork paused midway to her mouth. Yes, of course. And his complexion. It was darker in his baby photos. Her smile tightened. Babies change. I leaned forward. Cynthia, can I ask you something? I've been having strange thoughts lately. Thoughts about James, about who he really is. Her eyes lit up with vindication. She leaned closer. You can tell us the truth, Alina. Was there someone else? I pressed record on my phone, hidden in my pocket. What if I told you I have doubts of my own? About family, about what makes someone belong? Blood, she said instantly. Blood is what matters. Everything else is pretend. Perfect. I had what I needed. The next morning, Nora arrived at my apartment looking exhausted but triumphant. I received an anonymous tip, she said, spreading papers across my table. Someone who worked at Mercy Ridge in 1995. They told me to look for a nurse named Lillian Perkins and to ask her about an infant switch. My heart pounded. Infant switch? Nora nodded grimly. The tipster claimed Cynthia's baby was stillborn, but she couldn't accept it. She allegedly paid a nurse to switch her dead baby with a living one, another woman's child. The room seemed to spin. Mark? She stole Mark? I haven't confirmed anything yet, Nora cautioned, but I'm close to finding Lillian. She's retired now, moved out of state. I looked at James playing on his mat. If this was true, Mark wasn't just my husband and James's father. He was a victim too, stolen from his real mother, raised on lies. What do we do now? I asked. We find Lillian, Nora said firmly, and we find Heather Collins. One of them knows the truth. I nodded, determination replacing shock. And when we have proof, we end Cynthia's lies, all of them. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. It was about justice. Nora found Lillian Perkins, living in a modest house in Arizona. The former nurse was in her 70s now, her hands shaking slightly as she invited us inside. I knew someone would come eventually, she said, pouring tea. Some lies are too big to stay buried. I sat across from her, James asleep in his carrier. Did you help Cynthia West switch her stillborn baby with another woman's child in 1995? Lillian's eyes filled with tears. I never meant to hurt anyone. Mrs. West was inconsolable. Her baby was stillborn, cord wrapped around his neck. Nothing could be done. What happened next? Nora asked gently. Mrs. West was screaming, threatening to kill herself. Then suddenly, she got very calm. She called me back in and offered me $50,000, said there was another baby born that day whose mother was young, unmarried. No one would ever know. My stomach churned. And you agreed? Lillian stared at her hands. I was a single mother with massive debt. It was wrong, the worst thing I've ever done. I've lived with the guilt ever since. The other mother, I pressed. What was she told? That her baby died from respiratory distress. Lillian's voice broke. She never even got to hold him. Heather Collins lived in a small apartment across town, teaching kindergarten at the local elementary school. When we explained why we'd come, her hand flew to her mouth. My baby didn't die? She whispered, trembling. We believe your son was taken and raised by another woman, Nora explained gently. Heather sank onto her couch. I was only 19. The nurses said he had trouble breathing after birth. They took him away. Later, a doctor told me he didn't make it. Her eyes filled with tears. I've lit a candle for him every March 15th for 32 years. I swallowed hard. Could you tell us about that day? About the birth? Heather described a normal delivery, a baby boy with a strong cry. Nothing suggesting health problems. She'd named him Michael. They let me see him once, briefly. He had this little dimple in his chin, just like my dad. She touched her own chin unconsciously. A dimple, like Mark's, like James's. Do you have any keepsakes? Nora asked. Heather nodded, disappearing into a bedroom. She returned with a small box. They gave me his hospital bracelet and the blanket he was wrapped in for those few minutes I held him. She lifted out a small blue blanket with distinctive star patterns embroidered in the corner. I recognized it immediately. Cynthia had the exact same one in Mark's baby box. That night, Mark came over to spend time with James. As he rocked our son, I watched the dimple in his chin, identical to our baby's, identical to Heather's description. Mark, I said carefully, did your mom ever talk much about your birth? He frowned, thinking, not really, just that it was difficult, and she nearly died. Why? What about your biological father? She never talks about him. Mark shrugged. She said he abandoned her when she got pregnant. I never pushed for details. It upset her. Have you ever had your blood type checked? I asked, trying to sound casual. I'm O positive. Why all these questions? I knew from Cynthia's medical records that she was AB negative. It was impossible for her to have an O positive child. Just curious, I said. Do you remember that blue baby blanket with stars in your memory box? The one your mom kept? His eyes lit up. The one with the hand-stitched corner? Mom said it was my first blanket at the hospital. The same distinctive stitching Heather had shown us. The evidence was mounting, piece by devastating piece. I placed my hand over his. Mark, there's something I need to tell you, but I need you to promise you'll hear me out completely. You're saying my mother isn't my mother? Mark paced our living room, face ashen. That she stole me from some stranger after her own baby died? I'd shown him everything. Lillian's statement, the hospital records, the blood type impossibility, the matching blanket description. I know it sounds impossible, I said. But the evidence, he cut in. My entire life is a lie, and you're talking about evidence? He slumped onto the couch. This can't be real. There's one way to know for sure, I said gently. A DNA test between you and Heather Collins. Mark stared at his hands. If this is true, then who am I? I sat beside him, taking his hand. You're still you. You're still James's father. Nothing changes who you are inside. Everything changes, he whispered. Every memory, every birthday, every time she told me she loved me. Was it all a lie? I couldn't answer that. Instead, I said, Heather has been grieving a son who never died for 32 years. She deserves to know the truth, too. Mark looked up, eyes red. I want to meet her. Before any test, I need to see her face. Watching him cradle our son, I realized we were far beyond questions of paternity now. We were unraveling the lie at the center of Mark's existence. Mark agreed to a discreet DNA test with Heather. We met in a quiet diner outside of town. The moment they saw each other, something electric passed between them. Mark had Heather's eyes exactly, a unique hazel with gold flecks. The same eyes James had. You have my father's chin, Heather said softly, touching her own dimple. I knew it the second I saw you. Mark couldn't speak. He just stared, drinking in the face of the woman who might be his real mother. After an awkward coffee, they each swabbed their cheeks and sealed the samples. Nora would handle the testing through a private lab. We waited 2 agonizing days for results. During that time, Mark grew quieter, more distant from everyone, including me and James. He was wrestling with questions no one should have to face. When Nora called, her voice was solemn. It's confirmed. 99.8% match. Heather Collins is Mark's biological mother. I sat on our bed, holding the phone, my hand over my mouth. Even expecting it, the confirmation hit like a physical blow. Does Mark know? Nora asked. I'll tell him tonight, I said. But we're not confronting Cynthia yet. First, we need to understand exactly what happened. Because something told me this was just the tip of the iceberg. The next morning, Cynthia appeared unannounced at our door, a man in an expensive suit at her side. This is Gerald Hayes, my attorney, she announced, striding in without waiting for an invitation. We need to discuss custody arrangements. Mark, who'd spent the night on our couch, stood up. Custody? Of my own son? Cynthia's smile was razor-sharp. Given the circumstances, we believe shared custody would be appropriate when you leave Alina. My blood ran cold. Leave me? Mark just moved back home. A temporary lapse in judgment, Cynthia said dismissively. Mark needs to think about his future, his reputation. A clean break is best. I watched Mark's face. For weeks, he'd followed his mother's lead. Would he cave again? But something had shifted. Mark stepped beside me, his voice steady. There will be no custody arrangement because I'm not leaving my family, and you need to leave. Now. Cynthia's smile faltered. Don't be ridiculous. You know James isn't. The paternity test proves he's mine, Mark cut in. And I know about the DNA test with Heather Collins, too. I know everything, Mom. Or should I even call you that? Cynthia's face drained of color. For once, she had nothing to say. Cynthia recovered quickly, her shock morphing into cold fury. What nonsense is this? Some trash claiming to be your mother? How dare you? Mark's hands were shaking, but his voice remained steady. The test results came back. Heather Collins is my biological mother. Impossible, Cynthia spat. Just like it's impossible for an AB-negative mother to have an O-positive child? I interjected. The blood types don't lie, Cynthia. The attorney shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. West, what's going on here? Mark stepped closer to his mother. Tell me the truth. Did your baby die? Did you steal me? Cynthia's facade cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You were mine. You were perfect. I couldn't bury another child. The confession hung in the air. Even her lawyer looked stunned. Another child? Mark whispered. Cynthia covered her face. I had a daughter who died of SIDS 2 years before. When my son was still born, I couldn't bear it. That nurse offered a solution. The other mother was young, unmarried. I could give you a better life. You stole me, Mark said, his voice hollow. You let another woman believe her baby was dead for 32 years. Cynthia reached for him. Everything I did for love. Mark stepped back. No, you did it for yourself. 3 days later, we gathered everyone at our apartment. Mark, Heather, Nora, and finally, Cynthia. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Why am I here? Cynthia demanded, refusing to look at Heather. I placed a recorder on the coffee table. To hear the truth. I pressed play. First came Lillian's confession about the baby switch, then Cynthia's own admission from our living room. Finally, hospital records proving Heather's baby had been healthy at birth. Cynthia's face twisted with rage. You recorded me? This is illegal. I'll sue you for. For what? Mark cut in. For exposing how you stole someone else's child, how you bribed a nurse to help you, how you let Heather believe her baby died when you were raising him in your mansion. Heather, who had been silent, finally spoke. I missed everything. First steps, first words, school plays and birthdays. You stole all of it from me. I gave him a better life than you ever could. Cynthia hissed. That wasn't your decision to make, Heather said quietly. And it wasn't just Mark you stole from me. It was the life I could have had as his mother. I laid out the options. Cynthia could confess and face the consequences, or we would take everything to the police ourselves. For once, the great Cynthia West had no power plays left. Would you like some coffee? I asked, feeling strangely formal. Heather nodded, her eyes never leaving Mark's face. We sat in my living room, mother and son, separated by 32 years of lies. I don't know what to call you, Mark admitted. Heather is fine, she said gently. I don't expect to be mom overnight, maybe not ever. The honesty broke something open. Mark began asking questions about his biological father, a college boyfriend who didn't know about the pregnancy, about Heather's life, about the family he never knew he had. I have 2 half-sisters? He asked, eyes wide. Heather nodded, showing him pictures of 2 smiling teenagers. They'll be shocked to learn they have a brother. I watched Mark absorb this new reality, a whole family, a different history, a true origin. I saw grief for what he'd lost, but also wonder at what he'd found. I don't know who I am anymore, he confessed. Heather touched his hand gently. You're the man you've always been. My DNA doesn't change that. Before she left, Heather reached for James, cradling him with practiced ease. He has our eyes, she whispered. Your grandfather's eyes. It was the first piece of genuine family history Mark had ever received. Cynthia requested a final meeting at her home. Against my better judgment, we agreed. She'd aged a decade in a week. Gone were the pearls and perfect makeup. She looked small sitting in her massive living room. I've spoken to my attorneys, she said without preamble. I'll plead guilty to falsifying records and bribery. They'll seek leniency due to my age and mental state at the time. On the table between us lay several folders. One held DNA test results confirming Mark's parentage. Another contained Nora's investigation files. The third held Lillian's sworn statement. Mark leaned forward. Why did you do it? Really? Cynthia couldn't meet his eyes. After my daughter died, I was desperate for another child. When my son was stillborn, something in me broke. I saw you in the nursery. You looked so perfect, so alive. It seemed like a sign. So you bought me, Mark said flatly. I loved you from the moment I saw you, she whispered. That's not love, I said quietly. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't lie. Cynthia crumpled, tears streaming down her face. What happens now? Mark stood, his voice steady. Now we leave, and you never contact us again. We left her alone in that big, empty house built on lies. The court proceedings were mercifully brief. Cynthia pleaded guilty to all charges. Due to her age and health, she received house arrest and a massive fine, most of which went to Heather as restitution. We watched her leave the courthouse, cameras flashing, her head bowed. She tried to approach Mark one last time. Everything I did was because I loved you, she insisted, reaching for his arm. Mark stepped back. You didn't love me. You loved the idea of me, the son you could shape and control. If you'd loved me, you would have wanted me to know the truth. I gave you everything, she cried, voice cracking. Except the truth, Mark replied. You stole me from my mother, lied to me my entire life, then tried to destroy my marriage and take my son when things didn't go your way. Mark, please. Goodbye, Cynthia, he said firmly. I'm going home to my family, my real family. Her face crumpled as security led her away. I felt a strange mixture of pity and satisfaction watching her leave our lives forever. On the courthouse steps, Mark took a deep breath of free air. Something had changed in him, a weight lifted that he hadn't known he was carrying. It's over, I said, squeezing his hand. He nodded. No, it's just beginning. That night, after putting James to bed, Mark found me on the balcony watching the stars. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have trusted you, should have stood by you. I'd been waiting for this moment, rehearsing what I'd say, but now that it was here, the prepared speech vanished. You broke something between us, I said simply. When you moved out, when you believed her lies about me. I know. He knelt beside my chair, tears in his eyes. I was weak and confused, but I never stopped loving you or James. Not for a second. I touched his face gently. I understand why you doubted. Your entire life was built on lies. In a way, you were programmed to question everything. That's no excuse, he whispered. No, it's not, I agreed, but it helps me make sense of it. We have a lot to rebuild, Mark. He nodded, taking my hands in his. I'll spend every day proving myself to you, if you'll let me. I studied his face, the face I'd loved for 7 years, now filled with new meaning, new history. We'll see, I said quietly. But for the first time in weeks, I felt hope flickering between us again. Cynthia's empire crumbled. Friends deserted her. The charity boards she chaired asked her to resign. Her social standing, the thing she valued most, vanished overnight. Mark watched it all with strange detachment. She built her entire identity on appearances, he observed. Now everyone sees who she really is. Meanwhile, we began building bridges to Heather and her family. It was awkward at first, stilted conversations and careful questions. But James became our connector, the future pulling us together despite the painful past. Heather's daughters, Mark's half-sisters, were fascinated by their new adult brother. They shared pictures of their family, pointing out similarities in features and mannerisms. You laugh just like Grandpa did, the older one told Mark, showing him a faded photograph. For the first time, Mark saw his reflection in other people. Real connections, real blood, real history. I have a family, he whispered to me that night. A real one. I squeezed his hand. You always did, but now it's bigger. 6 months later, we hosted a small gathering at our new house. Heather and her daughters, my parents, a few close friends who'd stood by us. The mood was cautiously celebratory. To new beginnings, my father toasted, raising his glass. Mark had been quiet all evening, watching James crawl around the living room, reaching for colorful blocks. Now he cleared his throat. I've been thinking about names, he said. I was born Michael Collins. I became Mark West. Now I'm somewhere in between. Heather touched his arm gently. You're whoever you choose to be. He nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. I'd like to change my last name to Collins West, to honor both paths of my life. The simple statement moved everyone. It acknowledged the truth while preserving the journey. Later, as guests departed, Mark showed me papers he'd been keeping in his office. A new trust fund for James, separate from any money connected to Cynthia. I'm cutting financial ties with her completely, he explained. Building something clean for our son. I leaned against him, feeling the solid strength that had returned to his shoulders. We're going to be okay, I said, half question, half statement. He kissed the top of my head. Better than okay. We're going to be real. 1 year after the DNA test that changed everything, I watch Mark reading a bedtime story to James. Our son is growing fast, babbling words, standing on wobbly legs. Mark makes funny voices for each character, and James giggles, patting the colorful pages. On our mantel sits a new family portrait, Mark, James, and me in the center, surrounded by Heather, her daughters, and my parents. A family blended by choice and truth, not perfect, but authentic. The doorbell rings. It's Heather, bringing homemade cookies and a small photo album she found. Baby pictures of me, she explains, eyes twinkling. Look at those matching dimples. Mark and Heather sit together, flipping pages, discovering connections. I slip away to give them privacy, this mother and son rebuilding a bond that should never have been broken. Later, after Heather leaves and James sleeps, Mark finds me on our porch swing. We survived a war, I say quietly, echoing words I once whispered in doubt. He nods, taking my hand. We're still standing. The truth nearly destroyed us. Yet here we are, stronger for having faced it. Cynthia's gone. The lies are exposed, and our family, more real than ever before. Mark kisses me under the stars, both of us scarred but healing, both of us finally home.